Welcome back to Maximum News. We got the shortest news segment in the history of this show for you, ladies and gentlemen. Side, it's finally happened. The one game that I've always dreamed of being announced. Avatar: The Last Airbender is getting an open world game.
That really, wow.
Exclusively on mobile.
That is terrible.
All right, and that's the end of the segment. Okay, moving on to the next one. Hogwarts Legacy, a game that you and I have been enormously looking forward to, but it's sort of been a question mark in regards to its release date, because for the last several months we've been told that it'd be coming out in, quote, holiday 2022. Which,
yeah, and I'm so glad that it's coming out in holiday 2022, because you know what, these big open world games, they're great. They take an enormous time to go through. So, I'm so glad we get to go through this holiday season, because, if it got moved to next year, it would be competing with Starfield and Baldur's Gate 3 and a whole bunch of other like RPG games that I have to play.
It got moved to next year.
No. Oh, yeah, no.
It did.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, man.
Okay, so I'm just going to have to, become a hermit next year, I guess.
Yeah, I'll lose my job.
I mean, seriously, Tower of Fantasy just came out. All these other open world games just came out. Cult of the Lamb just came out. Saints
Row's coming out soon. No, I'm kidding. We're not interested in that. Yeah, I'm sorry,
man. I get it that it's still this continuing there's so many things screwing up right now.
Yeah.
In the world, essentially. On top of apologies if you hear a fan in the background. It is almost 40 degrees Celsius here. For those of you who don't know what Celsius is, that's about 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's 100, but yes.
Yeah. It's crazy hot, so apologies for that. But no, I get that there's been a lot of delays and there's been a lot of problems, and gosh darn it, you would think that somebody would take advantage of releasing now. But I guess that there are some companies that are releasing now. Obviously, I just named a few. Mm-hmm. But this is disappointing and worrisome in the sense that, not that I doubt this game will be good. I think the people working on this game have been doing really, really well. And I hope that it's good. I don't know if it's going to be good. I fear that, with many games we've had recently, it's going to be a train wreck. And I'm worried about that. So fingers crossed, and yeah.
Well, not every delay is equivalent to other delays. Like Elden Ring. Still Game of the Year for me. But remember, that was originally coming out in January. But then it got delayed a month. And it was still awesome. Hogwarts Legacy, I was always assuming that it was going to be coming out late first week, early second week of December. Anyways.
Yeah, because it would really move the numbers.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that would, if you put that out over the holiday, I mean, that's just going to hit a lot of nostalgia vibes for a lot of people.
Sure.
And again, we don't want we don't want more games coming out before they're ready. We were having a inflammatory discussion on Discord. Not you and me, but me and some other people were discussing the issues of when it's ready kind of thing. And there are two extremes to that. Right? There's the extreme of a game comes out, we're all hyped for it. I think you know which one I'm talking about, and then it kind of blows up and crashes and burns, and that's never good. Nor is it good to have a game sit in development for, and it may not necessarily be development hell, but there's a lot of games that, and history proves this. If you have a game that sits in development for over 10 years, the chance of it being a success is very, very minimal.
Yeah.
And the primary reason for that is that you've designed and made the game conceptually for a different audience that's around a decade later. And there's always going to be niche pockets. There's always going to be like people who are hoping for something. I'm going to talk about Jagged Alliance in it here. But there is a danger of like, making the game too large, making it too big, and then by the time it actually gets out, worst case scenario, your audience has moved on. The game genre that you're creating is no longer fun. Like we had that with the MOBAs. Remember the MOBAs? Every couple of weeks, there's a new MOBA being announced. MOBA, for those of you who don't know, is basically like League of Legends. Everybody was going nuts over that. Everybody was thinking that this is going to be the next big thing. All these companies sunk hundreds of millions of dollars collectively into making and designing a whole bunch of these games. EA, Activision, all these big companies like said, yes, we're gonna do this. And then when the game came out, everybody it's a snooze fest, because it's like nobody's looking to expand into that genre if they're a new player in the genre. Like League of Legends' biggest spike for new players was when they created a TV show for it. So there are problems with this, and I hope this is not the case. And they really did miss their window here, because that nostalgia of like, Christmas. But I mean, the world might be on fire by that time too. So you never know. At the current rate that we've been going, fun.
Yeah, it's just a couple months. I understand your personal reasons for wanting it to come out earlier. For me, I have Callisto Protocol to look forward to in December. Mm-hmm. I got God of War Ragnarok to look forward to in November. I'll be spending plenty of time with that. And then I just have to wait 2 months. It's only 2 months, really, you can argue. And maybe even slightly less than that, depending on what part of December it was originally going to come out in. So I don't mind. I know some people will be disappointed, but, when it's delayed, even if the game ends up sucking when it comes out, it means it'll suck just a little bit less. And that's a good step forward. Let's just put it like that. Let's go on to something else. Some actually really interesting news. So, Syb, there are certain titles that maybe we've never actually played the game, but we collectively as gamers hold up as important games for, permitting games of similar ilk to come out after that. We have wonderful survival horror titles like Dead Space, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, but games like that would not exist without Alone in the Dark. That's one of the oldest, it's one of the most beloved. Unfortunately, there are a whole bunch of titles past the original trilogy that weren't that good, from what I hear. Like, I never played Alone in the Dark, but it's still one of those beloved titles that, there's enough of a fan base there that people have been wanting to see a new entry. Well, turns out that THQ Nordic just announced a reboot of Alone in the Dark. So here are some of the details. Apparently, the game is going to be returning to... Well, it's going to have an original story, but it's going to incorporate characters, areas, and themes from the original trilogy from the 90s. That should make a lot of people happy. It's pleasing people that know nothing about it, but also pleasing people that have been around with this series for a long time. It's going to be like the original trilogy in that it's going to be set in the American South in the 1920s. Based on the gameplay trailer that they released during
it's a good time.
Yeah. Based on the trailer that they released from the THQ Nordic showcase, it looks interesting. It looks a little bit like The Evil Within, to a degree. Maybe a little bit more action heavy than people were expecting. But despite that fact, the reaction to the trailer and generally online, it's not like, oh, this sucks. It's mostly positive, which is really good. But here's the thing that really interests me as somebody who has never played Alone in the Dark. But this might be the game that might get me into it, and there's a single reason why. The writer for this game is Mikael Hedberg. This is the guy that wrote Soma. He's also the guy that wrote Amnesia: The Dark Descent. No, The Dark Descent, rather. Those two games, whatever you think about Amnesia, Soma for me is one of the top 5 most intelligently written games ever. It's also terrifying. Based on that fact alone, I'm going to get this game. Soma is that good. If you guys have never played it, I highly recommend it. It's scary. It's terrifying. Not only is it like bloody and, it's terrifying in a traditional way, it's also like deeply disturbing what was some of the themes and concepts that it presents you. And I think if anybody's going to be able to take the Alone in the Dark classic formula, reinvent it, and make Alone in the Dark relevant in 2022, it's going to be him. So I'm very intrigued. The trailer is great. Syb, you got to look at the trailer. What did you think of it? And also, do you have any history with Alone in the Dark?
I played it a very long time ago. Not all the way through. It was one of those games that I had access to for a short period of time. Didn't have the budget to pick it up myself. Didn't necessarily click with it. So yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like I kind of missed it, essentially. But I am like aware of it, and the fact that the guy who's creating this new version sounds a lot like a comedian I used to like.
A comedian?
So, yeah, comedian. I'm trying to find his name. It's like
yeah.
I'm like, wait, that guy? No, that guy's a comedian. He's not a game dev. But yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's like, again, I hope that they make this good, and I hope they make this right, and because I want to see more of my old favorites become, new games again. Not because I have a deep love of, just rehashing things, but I would like to see just an overall like improvement to rehashing. Right? Does that make sense? Like I want to have my rehashed game content actually be better than, before. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. People have rehashed stuff all the time. Although I will say that games that have been rehashed in certain ways, especially ones that THQ Nordic are responsible. What?
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's THQ Nordic when it comes to some of the stuff that they're rehashing or re-releasing. They tend to be doing pretty good. The SpongeBob stuff, Destroy All Humans, Darksiders. People really like that. Darksiders, Desperados. I can't remember if Remnant from the Ashes was a game that a whole lot of people liked or not. But I generally feel pretty confident with the team that they got on board. Unfortunately, I can't speak much more to Alone in the Dark. I wish I grew up with that series so I could speak more to it. But it seems like, based on the reaction, that this is something to keep our eyes on. We don't know when it's coming out yet. It was just announced literally today. But we will definitely provide you guys with more information when it comes out. All right.
Whenever I hear anybody talk about Alone in the Dark, all I can think about is the
movie,
the Canadian kids show. Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And 10 points to anybody who remembers that. That's good stuff.
I think I remember watching that as a very young kid, and I actually remember being a little bit freaked out by, I don't know, some ghost face that I saw in one of those shows, but a long time ago. Pushed it out of my mind. Took me to therapy.
Just rewatch it now. It's pretty hilarious.
Oh yeah, is it really cheesy? All right, I can't remember, unfortunately. All right, next story. Syb, I don't really understand like why there's such beef around this. It seems like the stuff that Xbox and Sony are fighting over is just common practice, but why don't you explain to me and everybody else what's been going on there?
So Sony is pulling, like, I wouldn't say they're playing dirty. They're playing to survive, right? And they have to, because they are a very small company compared to Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft could literally eat them for lunch.
Sure.
So in that regard, you have to be on the defensive. But Xbox is complaining a little bit about how they're just how they're trying to inhibit growth, I guess, is the claim.
Okay.
Is that they're trying to inhibit growth of their subscription service by blocking as many games going to, multiple consoles as possible. And in the sense of, like, well, I just don't want to play with you because I don't think you have my best interest at heart. I think there is a thing for that, and I think that anybody who knows anything about the history of Microsoft has to be a little concerned. However, I also should point out that it's not that Sony themselves have been guilty of playing a little dirty, especially when it comes to pressuring devs to not to release on both sides. And I think that, and I want to be careful because, again, I'm not, like, these are big mega corporations. They're not your friend. They're not your buddy. Neither one of them are. Microsoft is doing some good things at the moment. They are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And in the past, they've made some hilariously stupid mistakes that got, that nearly destroyed the video game side of their company. Because, big corporate, boards tend to not know what actual real people struggle with or want, or, any of that kind of stuff. It's shocking and disturbing how little they understand their actual, like, economy. But just overall, like, I'm bringing this up because it's interesting to note that you're going to get less games that are the same games. Why? Because some people just don't want to play, and they're rigging the board in as much of a way as they can, and that's a little concerning for the industry. That's kind of where I'm at with it. It's like, I really worry what this is going to do to the industry as a whole, what it's going to do to the people who are trying to, or who want to see a bigger and a better product. So yeah, it's not that huge of a story. It's something that I think we should keep our eye on, because what may end up happening is we may end up seeing a full-blown, like, war between these two companies. And if that happens, I don't think that, like, that might be good for the consumer, because they'll both be competing super hard to get your interest and to play their games. But it may not be that good for developers. And that's kind of what I'm worried about. Because, again, when you have two companies that are competing with each other very hostilely, you tend to get good stuff. But the outcome from that usually is that the workers of those companies, or the secondary people involved in that, they don't always see anything, like, good coming out of that. Sometimes it's their life more difficult. And then the other thing that happens is that if they do go to full-on war, there tends to be a loser. And in the case of video gaming as it is right now, I don't think we need a loser, like, just in general. I think the danger and the risk of having a, air quotes, loser is going to damage the overall game industry, like, a little bit bad. And it may not necessarily be obvious at first. Maybe it's, maybe Xbox, sweeps the floor. They end up taking over basically everything. And then they're just kind of standing there going, "Mwahaha, we've won everything." And you get some good products for a little while, up until, who's who looks at the scenario and looks at the situation and is like, hey, I think I can triple our profits because we don't have any competitors. And so for a while, we end up getting nothing or just bad service because there's no healthy competition until that company then breaks down. Everybody loses their jobs there. And the whole industry has to like almost, it doesn't start from scratch, but it gets a big reset. This is the crash that happened, back in the 80s for video games. And it's something that we really want to avoid, just in general. So I bring it up not because there's anything we can do about it, but keep your eye on what's going on, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see like the clear mechanisms that would make it like clear to me that like things are going to get any worse for developers than they are right now.
I mean, developers right now are actually in a pretty good situation. A lot of them are now able to work from home.
Yes,
permanently, which is actually kind of a good thing. Because again, if you're capable, not everybody is capable of working from home, but for those that are, the opportunity and the chance to really like progress, your career and to cut down on costs, that's all a good thing. Like all the people that were having to shell out a couple $100 every month for transportation, they no longer have to do that.
Yeah.
And when they're already pretty close to the poverty line, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a good thing that they may not have been able to like quit their current job, which is underpaying them, and start working at another company because just the cost and the dauntingness. I don't think I'm saying that right, but the concern over actually moving different companies, and locations, that's a problem. That's a frightful thing sometimes for some people, right? Like that's not something that they are necessarily like happy to do for the most part. It's very scary to pick up your life and move to a completely different country or even just across the country from where you currently live. But now with the ability to work from home, you have that a little bit better. And good game developers who know their stuff, the market is aggressively trying to hire them. Like right now, Blizzard is desperately trying to hire staff. I wonder why. And then all these other companies like Riot, all these other like big American companies, but also a lot of indie companies, they're having decent success and they're starting to hire like crazy. So this has resulted in insignificant increase to wages. So yeah, be competitive. Speak up for yourself. If you're not making enough money, like, say, hey, boss, I could really use a raise, or I'm going to have to start looking elsewhere. Mm-hmm. I would start looking elsewhere before you say that, because some of them just tend to fire you on, as quickly as possible. And don't let them fire you on the spot when you mention that you're looking for another job, because they're not supposed to take that as a threat. They're supposed to take that as a reminder that they need to compete for your services, right? So, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, that's all. Like, it's just something that I was looking at, and I felt a little worried that it might not be good. And this ties into our next story about a fan building their own version of an Attack on Titan video game. Because there's no good Attack on Titan video games, and lo and behold, somebody was able to create one that is pretty darn good, actually.
Okay? Like, here, let me. Have you watched Attack on Titan? Because I haven't.
Yes, I have. Okay. I watched the first season. I know that the anime crowd might come for me, but I'm just not. I just didn't fall in love with the show. The music is great. The writing is interesting and better than a lot of other like standard stuff that comes out. Things that aren't like critically acclaimed. And if you hate me for that, I don't know if I should say it. If you hate me for that, Well, gee, somebody asked me, how do they start watching the Fate series? And I said, hey, you know what? It's a cool thing about a reverse isekai universe, and that you should totally, what's the word? Just watch it on randomize. Like, put all the seasons together and just watch it on randomize, because it's all the same thing. That should get the people who, are mad at me for Attack on Titan a little bit, off my back.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Attack on Titan video game. Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting that we're seeing this.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I don't know how this appears to people who are fans of Attack on Titan. I've never watched it, but I look at it and it looks kind of cheap, but maybe like the gameplay as it's presented in the trailer that you showed me is actually like helping you guys relive a specific element of the anime, because I don't know anything about it. So is that what it is?
It's not a perfect, like, obviously this is not a I want to reiterate this. This is not a triple A game in the slightest. This is an indie game made by, I think, one dude.
One dude, okay.
I think it's one dude. But he's been able to make what people want from an Attack on Titan game better than, well, clearly anybody who's even tried, more or less.
Okay. Well, when you put it that way, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, this isn't hey, there's an Attack on Titan game and somebody's completely smashed it out of the park. They haven't, because it's not that type. It's not a top of the line game. But what it is it's showing and it's reminding us that developers and small team developers are going to be able to start competing with these big giant companies, and these big giant companies, especially that buy the rights to, because I'm pretty sure that somebody owns the rights to making an Attack on Titan game, and they haven't made it because it's not on their priority list. And that's kind of a problem, right? Like, it's legitimately kind of a problem if you can't get something that you really, really want, and you can't get it because somebody else is standing in the way, because corporate decided to buy out this thing. They've got 20 years to make a game, and it's not actually on their list. Maybe sometimes some of these people buy the rights to make these games to just keep the game away from,
oh yeah,
interrupting their other games. And again, I point to the Battlefront stuff. EA got the rights to make Battlefront and just continued to mess it up. They made 2 versions of it, and it was garbage every single time. And why? Well, why would they want to encourage people to get in line behind a massive series like, a successful version of Battlefront, if it existed? And then what are they going to do? Just turn their back on their own Battlefield massive troop assault game? And worse, build it up to the point where there's 15 million players playing this regularly, and then suddenly it goes back to Disney, and then Disney turns around and sells it to somebody else or takes it over on their own studio. It's people forget that in the power games of big corporations, sometimes it's better to remove a piece from the board if it's going to cause you problems, and it doesn't matter if it's even your own piece. You're more than willing to sacrifice one of your things so that you could set up to win something else. And again, these companies aren't that smart. These boards aren't that smart. They constantly fail in doing this because they constantly screw this up. Because the concept of it's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this, and then turns out that they can't. So yeah, it's a reminder that we have more games coming down the line as tools become more available to people, and people who are passionate about things start to work within stuff. I've been looking at the Unreal Engine, the new one, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's legitimately amazing, and it's easy. It's like really easy, to the point where we've had a discussion within our own community on whether we want to even like we want to try like throwing together a game concept, and it's something that we might start on this fall. We'll see. The life has been crazy busy recently.
I'll be happy to promote it, man, on my channel if you want.
More games, better games made by people who love things. I think we'll see a lot more of this coming down the road.
And speaking of fan-made games in Unreal Engine 5, just very quickly, if y'all remember Bionicle, the what? Oh, you said that's it. Okay. If y'all remember Bionicle from back in the day, the Lego the Lego sets, there's this. Oh, sorry, I had myself muted on Discord. That's why you couldn't hear me. I was actually talking. I said, speaking of Unreal Engine 5 and fan-made games, if y'all remember Bionicle from back in the day, Lego sets, there's this game being made by fans called Bionicle Masks of Power. Go follow them on Twitter. It's like Bionicle open world meets Dark Souls. And it looks really damn good, especially if you're a fan of like the OG Bionicle series from the early 2000s, like I am. All right,
moving on. Isn't it sad that there's some bigwigs who look at stuff like that? They're like, well, we don't want them doing that. We're going to show up and ruin their day, instead of just seeing that, hey, maybe this is a really good investment opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, invest in the fans to make your own game. That way you don't have to spend as much money yourself, but you can just, work off the residuals, which is a strategy. Konami, why don't you do it with Silent Hill? Anyways, Quakecon, what's the deal with that?
Quakecon is coming.
When?
Quakecon is coming. And we've got some interesting news on it. Some reason, despite the fact that this is QuakeCon, aka Bethesda, we're not going to get any Starfield, which is really weird. And this is next week, by the way.
Okay, August 18th to the 20th. Okay. Yeah, QuakeCon, I've always heard of it. For some reason in my mind, I always just envisioned QuakeCon as a place where people got together and played PvP games. What is it?
It's a convention.
Just a convention?
It's a convention, and they typically, or they used to have competitions there and tournaments like that. I don't know if they're still doing that right now. But it's going to be this is still going to be digital only. We're going to see some stuff, but we're not getting any big news coming out of it, and that's a little weird, because we kind of figured we'd be getting a lot of interesting news coming out of it, but we're getting nothing on the stuff that we're actively, like, big stuff that we're actively interested in here. So that's kind of weird, and it's kind of weird that's going to be like that. So it may be a little quiet, because it is, it's a digital only thing still, and that doesn't help. That really doesn't help your brand, right? To have like a show that doesn't do very well, or a convention that doesn't do very well, and that you're there trying to like announce, some big thing. Everybody remember when they announced the Borderlands 3 at that disaster of a press conference or mini conference where the head of the studio,
Randy Pitchford,
when Randy does that terror, like it's like a beginner level magic trick, and he made it look like it was like huge. The guy loves Magic. I love Magic too. Like, not Magic the Gathering, Magic as in like show Magic, table Magic, that kind of stuff, card Magic.
Yeah.
It really is actually a thing that really helped me like develop myself as a young person. But
Dude, me too.
yeah, but the was not the right time nor the place, and did not utilize the I have a magic trick that would blow that one out of the water for the most part. Um, and I picked that one up from Penn and Teller because I got to meet them and train with them.
Really?
Oh yeah. No, they did back in the day. Like this was quite a few years ago. They did a lot of. They traveled all over the place doing magic. It's like a little like training session.
Oh, I didn't know
Goes
that.
for like a day or two. Oh yeah. You can meet all kinds of like cool people in the if you're a card carrying member. Yeah, and there's always groups of it. I've been to a couple of the big. I've been to the fancy place in New York, Florida, and one other one where I can't remember where it was. I was really that by that I mean by fancy place, which is such a good technical term. What I mean to say is that there's Randy Pitchford bought the Castle of Magic, which is like a brother. So there's an organization that like runs stuff, and this organization owns a castle in the States, and they call it like the Castle of Magic. It's their headquarters, or was one of the headquarters for the Brotherhood of Magicians, long time ago. And he now owns that place, which is super weird. Like there's books there that have been there for like 100 some odd years, and he just owns it. So creepy, so weird. Anyways, completely off topic. Quakecon. Let's hope it's not like Randy Pitchford's broken thing, and don't expect to hear anything from any games that we're actively interested in. Like a lot of people are desperate for more news on Starfield, for more news on the next Elder Scrolls, for even the Fallout show, as well as obviously Fallout 5 and any other new Fallout games. But and Quake games. Like again, we're anticipating new Quake game. But apparently they got nothing to show, and it's going to just be a weird show where you're going to hear some stuff. They're going to talk about some
They're talking about
interesting
Redfall
and exciting things, but we won't know until a couple days from now what that'll actually entail, because they haven't actually put out a full on list like things that they're going to cover in depth. We kind of have some basic ideas, but that great. So
some people are expecting Redfall. Some people are expecting Quake 2 remaster.
Disappointing.
Disappointing.
The thing that's not disappointing though is Jagged Alliance.
True. Yeah, let's talk about that. That like I never heard about.
Gameplay came out about that.
Yeah.
And I'm cautiously optimistic, because anytime I get excited for a video game in the last 4 years, it's always been a fairly large disappointment.
Yeah.
But Jagged Alliance 3 gameplay came out. Looks solid. Like really legitimately looks solid. It's kept a lot of the stuff that was in Jagged Alliance 2, and not that other terrible version that they tried to make. But it's also got some other stuff, such as you can do a strafing run, essentially. So you tell one of your commanders to go from one side of the hall to down the hall and the other side, and to shoot at any targets they see it at on the way with burst fire. And so he moves down and he burst fire as he's running to cover. That's pretty cool. Won't lie. I think that's that's good iteration on this. You never played the original Jagged Alliance.
No, I think I've heard of it, but I didn't know until you. Yeah, please explain for me and everybody else what the deal is.
So Jagged Alliance was one of the. So there was number 1, and then there was number 2, and number 2 set up a lot of things in video gaming that we just take for granted. One of the things is good high quality dubbing for characters and voice work within a game. I don't know how they managed to do it, especially considering that this was, I think it was in the 90s. I gotta check. I believe it was it came out in 1999. I have no idea how they managed to nail such good voice work for that game, both in the story content as well as a bunch of other stuff. Up until that point, a lot of games would hire like one or two people to do some voice lines, and they were typically like theater type people, and they would approach it like very much like from a narration point of view, and then that would be it, right? And what we got in Jagged Alliance was this showcase of like, nah, you can have interesting characters that have interesting banter and voice lines that after playing for, 2 decades, I still find new voice lines that I haven't discovered before. Not that I play it religiously, but it's like that's kind of a big thing. The other big thing was like large world, big scope. When you're playing the game initially, you think, oh, it's just a you fight the bad army and take the country over, and that's it. And you can play the game like that, and that's it. But you can also dig deeper and discover like giant monsters, like inhuman creatures that you need, absolute god level weapons to take down. You can discover all kinds of different things within the role playing schematics. You can marry some of your commanders off. There's just a ton of stuff that you can do in this game, and it's so fascinating that this being on the forefront and being so good that they couldn't follow that up for like literally over 2 decades later. They tried once before, and they said, "Oh, turn-based games aren't a thing anymore. Nobody wants turn-based games." And so they came out with their new version of Jagged Alliance, which was like this weird like middle, happened like about a decade ago. And that one was atrocious. It was just garbage. It was a lot. It was like, it wasn't turn-based. It was live. So you just like, grouped your commanders up and then just like had them like move around the field by just like right clicking, and they would just like attack things. Just basically like a really bad MOBA, like not a good MOBA in any way, shape, or form. It's a really bad version of it. And they said, "Oh yeah, no, it's not going to be, nobody's interested in playing turn-based strategy games anymore." And then XCOM 2 came out and sold like 17 million copies, I think, and showed that. And then Valkyrie Chronicles came out, and then Fire Emblem came out, and a bunch of other games came out. And what did it show? It showed that people are actually really interested in turn-based video games. So thankfully, over 2 decades later, we finally have a new game to sink our teeth into that's going to like hopefully live up to my hope. And again, it's so dangerous to hope for good video games these days. It's been so sad, but I'm legitimately looking forward to this one. I think it's.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be great, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it looks intriguing. I'm happy for people that grew up with that franchise. Unfortunately, it's like I said, I don't know much about it. Plus, as far as like top-down views in games, that's another prejudice I gotta get over. I got over my turn-based prejudice. I love turn-based games now, and at least that game, Jagged Alliance, is in part that. If I can only get over the top-down view thing, then maybe this could be a game that you and I both enjoy, Seb. But unfortunately, besides that, I don't really have a whole lot else to say. Guys, that was all the news stories. It's been sort of a week a couple weeks in terms of news stories, but hopefully things will start to pick up once the summer is over, because aside from Saints Row, there's not a whole lot else that's coming out this month, and even then people aren't particularly excited about that. Things will start to pick up more, though, once we get closer to Gamescom and Tokyo Game Show, and then November and December when the games that Saib and I are excited about actually come out. But don't worry, whatever news starts to come out between now and then, we'll continue to do weekly shows. I want to thank Saib, as always, for doing the show with me. Saib, do you want to tell people about the main channel real quick?
Yeah, check out the Triple S League on YouTube. We got a bunch of game guides, a lot of Stray stuff still coming up. And then we're going to be, Ash has been doing some great work with his AI channel. Just follow the channel links on our channel to discover that. He's been doing some interesting stuff, and we've been having some really interesting conversations about AIs, AI programs, AI tools, and some other stuff. So yeah, it's gonna be very exciting.
Cool. And you guys can just find me on all the various forms of social media, just at Max Derrat. I'll put links to that and Saib stuff in the description box below. Thanks, guys, and until we do this again next week, I want to remind you, you know what to do. Stay yellow. Peace out.
Peace.